Hi everybody, welcome back. This is instructor Phil Demetriadis, and I wanted to do a quick demo for you today, talking about real basic principles of drawing the human figure, and especially the clothed figure, what you're looking for when you're drawing, and some sort of do's and don'ts. Because we have a lot of you guys that are out there, you're trying to get better, and some people that watched our live feed of figure drawing got a little confused and they were a little out of it. So I'm going to try to walk you through on what to do. So this is sort of what you want to do. You want to think about some basic shapes, and you're going to have limitations on the poses. In the beginning, they're going to be gesture poses, and then after that, they're going to go to some more advanced poses in length where you can get into some rendering. One of the biggest problems I find in figure drawing, especially with the clothed figures, a lot of people are not taught about construction, and they're taught more about rendering. So what we want to do is we want to make sure, here's sort of rule number one. Rule number one is when we're looking at a particular item, a model, and when I meant by item, I meant like starting with a shirt or something. We don't want to be doing this. We don't want to be tracing and starting with outlines of somebody's shirt and getting this in. Because what this is doing is it's basically building a stagnant linear line drawing that doesn't really allow us to go anywhere. There's no flow. There's no freedom to it. Okay, so that right there is without a doubt rule number one. Okay, because I noticed, I have quite a few different students and I see people draw all the time, and one of the most common things that'll happen is they're starting with exterior contour line. So say no to exterior contour line. So this is what you do want to do. Okay, the first method, an old friend of mine in like instructor, he had this thing, he would call it like, it's basically working off of a head ball and thinking about hooks. And let me explain that to you for a minute. So number one, we look over at our pose and we see what's happening, and you start with that head ball shape, right? Looking at this model right here, let me bring up color picker. Where's color picker? There we go. So looking over here, you'll notice, let me see if I can do this in blue and you can still see it. Here's the head ball. Look at that curve in the body. Do you see it there? So that's one of the key things we're looking for, and the reason why he would call this the hook method is it's sort of like you're making these hooks like this. Do you see that? Sort of looks like a fishing hook. Okay, so what you want to do when you start sketching is sort of, you can start with the head ball, and what you do is by throwing a gesture line down like this, you're immediately identifying the position of the head in relationship to the position of the major axes, which is the flow of the body. Okay, that's rule number one. Number two from this, what you can do, what I like to do is I like to come down and sort of find and land and get a support leg in there. So by throwing one little leg in like that, I see where there's a support leg, and then what I like to do is I sort of come over here on the hips. I might throw a little bit of a line in, and then I could come over here, throw down a secondary support leg, and I could see where the figure is sort of standing. So I did that really quickly and efficiently, right? It's part of my gesture sketching. So now my next step is I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to go over to the arms, and what I do is I throw a circle in. So if you technically look at it, we're building with circles and then using lines. So whether you want to call those lines directional lines, or if you want to call them a line of action, which many people say quite often, or if you want to call those lines a gesture line, that's totally fine. There's numerous ways to say it. But what I do is I build looking at the model, and I come up here, okay, and I sort of do this, again, it's like this hook thing. Do you see that? And what I like is it's flowing. There's a nice, simple, flowing feel, and it allows me to get in here and figure out going from elbow to arm, and then I could come in here and connect lines a little bit later, and it gives me a feeling of what part of the figure is doing. So I use circles. I start with the head as a circle, my shoulder is a circle, and then of course the circles are getting smaller. I have my elbow, and I go down over to my wrist, right? And then this allows me to sort of come over here really lightly, and if I want to, I can sketch a hand in, and I might sketch something else that the particular model's holding, right? From this point, what I like to do is I like to come down and try to focus on what part of the waist is doing, okay? And then I also have that other back arm. So I have some thickness coming down into here, into part of the waist. And then if I come over here and I draw sort of like a base circle that looks like it acts as sort of the pelvic bone, okay? That base circle allows me to see and find a way to sort of come in here and connect part of the legs back into this figure like that, okay? So that might be that foot that's right there in sort of the foreground. Now, looking at this, you see how if I go dot, dot, dot here, this is a basics on how that shape's going to connect to part of that pelvic bone. So when I come over to the other side, that's really helpful for me because I can look at the figure and go dot, dot, dot like that on the other side. And then I still have part of that old trace line there. And I can get that other leg that's coming in here. And I can get the position of that other foot on how it's going to be felt in relationship to that figure. Okay, so the next thing, I sort of threw that in on this particular pose because I want to get, we started with the head, we started with a line, I added in part of the foot, and that's my preference. I like to go down to the base to see where my character is standing, and also by going down to the base, it allows me to establish where they're standing. When artists don't do that sometimes, and they don't go downward in this direction, what happens is later on, they come in and they go down and they throw off part of their proportions, and the figure looks a little messed up, okay? The next thing that I do is I come back and I look at maybe the second arm. So if you look at the second arm here, part of his body is in a little bit of a twist like this, okay, and his second arm is mounted back here, and then his arm is sort of foreshortening back into this direction, okay? So if you look at it, his waist is coming up a little bit like this, his other arm's back here, and then that arm's sort of coming into here, it's foreshortening, and then boom, he has a hand again. For right now, for hands, all you really have to think about as a hand is drawing this. You start with the wrist and come over here and draw this base like this. You think of it as a triangle. I'll do another demo on hands later, right? And then we come back into this, and it's the same triangle flipped the other way, which represents sort of the figures. Boom, that's it. All you do from this point is a little bit later, if you're comfortable with it, you think about assigning a small circle and you indicate the basics of a thumb on one side, and if that doesn't work for you and it's on the other side, what you do is you just switch it up and you come back over to here like this and you put the thumb in like this. So, like that. Okay? So that's what's sort of cool about the way I like to do hands when I start off. And I could use some really cool demos on hands. I've done a couple for some other people and I like talking about them. Anyway, so I come in here, I get the hands. You can see his hands are sort of foreshortened a little bit, so I get that triangle in there. If I wanted to, I can throw a little bit of that thumb in there. I come over here, I have that hand shape there. Now, in this image, I cannot see right now where his thumb is, right? But if you decide you want to come in here and you want to throw that little thumb in there like that, and if it helps the pose, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Part of your responsibility is looking at the model and building off the pose and figuring out a way to make it look correct and make it look real. Okay, so I might come in here like this, and I might go like this and draw a little bit of that top hat that's in there, and then boom. And if I'm looking at the hat, I can just barely see underneath it, so I can figure out how that ellipse is working. And voila, that would be my first sketch. That's it, my gesture. That shouldn't take you more than just, 30, 40 seconds. Now I'm explaining it while I'm here on the computer, recording it, so I'm giving it a little bit more time. So that's what I'd like you guys to go for, okay? Now, here's something that's really cool, is that once you get used to this sort of method, okay, you need to apply this on a regular basis to all the different poses that you might be looking at. Here, let me go to a different model here. So here's a different model right here. So this one's a little bit more complicated in that now that part of the center mass of the model isn't staying as straight, which is totally fine, right? So let's just, again, break it out in simple lines. So number one, we have a head ball that's right about here, okay? Number two, you have a twisting, if you look at that gesture line, okay? Now here's something that helps me out. Where is the weight leg? Which part of the body is holding the weight right now? Okay, so if you, and some people get confused on this, and here's sort of your best answer, right? That gesture line comes down to right here, and if you look, the hips are sort of going this way, and then you have the shoulders sort of coming in like this a little bit, right? There's a term for that in drawing the human figure. It's called contrapposta. It means that you have these angles, or contrapposta, if you want to say it with an Italian accent, right? So it means you have these opposite angles that make the figure a little bit more interesting. And what's really cool about that is that does totally apply to character design and drawing people from observation. Even if they're not tilted, if you go in and tilt the shoulders and the hips at opposite angle, it makes them more interesting. So in terms of a weight leg, in this particular pose, the rule for the weight leg, as someone told me once, it's the leg that if you got rid of, the figure would fall. Well, in this case, if you look, here's something I learned when I was a wrestler back in the day about distribution of human weight is the human head automatically poses itself in left or right configuration depending upon where the center mass of the feet are. Bam, you see that right there? In fact, I was about a line off on that. I was just a teeny bit off. If you come like that and draw, boom, like that. If you take the distance from the feet every time and you come right down the middle, the head, so you can do this on your own. Push yourself to one side, stand on the left and go to one side. Your head will automatically reconfigure itself and put it in the center point between the mark of both the feet. You're like, whoa, that's cool. I know it's cool, right? That's why it was taught to us when we were in wrestlers, because one of your goals was to push your opponent, push their head this way, which got it off of that center of gravity from between their feet, which meant then if you came in at your opponent and you attacked their legs, they were going to be off kilter and out of balance, and that absolutely works. Okay, so by doing that, if I come over here to my little sketch, I can come over here and throw down sort of that same line that Phil taught you about, right? Right. So then if I come over here and I look at the waist, and I come over, I'm going to come in here, and I notice I have a leg coming back in here, and then I have another part of a leg that's coming down in here, and then if I look at part of that butt, might be in a shape sort of like that, and then I have this leg really defined. If you look at the weight, look at it going boom, it's sort of curving down, right? So if I come in here, I throw some of that curve down, it actually goes straight off of part of the knees. Do you see that? Like this, and boom, and it's coming right down into here, and then we're looking at it backwards and the foot sort of like that. Okay, that's fine. So I can come into part of this. Now this is, I'm going to come up here real quick. I'm going to throw in, she has longer hair, so let's say I don't really care about all the details. I'm not getting in there. I'm just throwing in a base for the hair like that, okay? And as I do this, remember, here are my arm sockets, right? So our first arm socket is coming up, and there's a flare in there. It's going bam, like that, outward, okay? It's a little bit of a flare. If we flare too much, we might make her arm look like it's getting really stiff. That's fine. I come over there to the top of the hand, and again, where do I start with? Boom, Phil taught you about that little triangle. That's that triangle in there, right? Then, if you want to get detail, you come over here, remember there's that little thumb that's in there, right? Coming off on the other side, okay? Then if you want to, you could throw in some of the little fingers like so, and then it'll make the hand look like it's doing what it's doing inside part of the gesture, okay? Then look at the other arm. The other arm is coming down in an angle like this, and it's tucking behind, okay? So if I come back in, she has some fabric, and she has these, man, she's got beautiful, like really defined figure in the hips. See that? Right here, they really pop out. So boom, you can get that. That's going to be an important line to get on there because the weight of those hips comes off like that. Okay, and then she has a little bit of the weight coming down into here. And you can see, it's a little hard to see, she has these muscles right here and here. Those are your external oblique muscles there. So they're tightening up a little bit, pinching, but that's fine. She has her Levi's on and they're pinching up a little bit. So she has a little bit of like pinch in there, and then part of that leg's coming up. Now, I need to adjust and get a little bit of an angle in there for like the butt. So that's part of the butt. If I look in here, part of her legs are connecting up about right there. Part of this leg is connecting in there. And then I have part of her butt sort of right in here, okay? That's going to be important for me because it helps me identify part of the weight of the figure, and it helps me identify the connection. So look at those connections. Do you see that? That leg is attached to the front like that, as this leg is sort of attached to here, and then that cylinder is going down, okay? So this is going to be sort of step 2 after you do this gesture line approach, is you come into your figure and you start figuring out where these sort of center lines are and how they are working, you know, like this. So by thinking about that and getting that down, it's adding a little bit more visual weight. Okay, I can come in here and her arm's coming down. Now, in this case, her arm's being covered, right? I sort of don't like that. So there's nothing wrong with you coming in and addressing the pose and changing the pose on your own. This is one of the benefits of drawing the figure, is that you get to come in and you get to look at part of that figure. Okay, part of her center line is like this way, coming down. All right, and her hair is going down this way, like that. Okay, so you can adjust the figure in a quick sketch any way that you want. It doesn't have to be completely locked in. Okay, so that's one of the benefits of why we go out drawing on a regular basis, right? Well, number one, we're drawing from observation. Number two, we're understanding proportion and shape. We're trying to gather gesture. And number three, something that you do, what I like to teach my students to do, is we're trying to get you to rotate human form in the figure from different angles and different points while you're looking at it, if that makes sense. Okay? All right. Anyway, so that one's done. All right. And let me see. Actually, we'll do some more a little bit later. I'm going to wrap up this demo real quick here because I need to render it and get it up on YouTube before our figure drawing event starts tonight. Okay? All right. So thank you. And I will see you guys soon. Bye.